Welcome back to Showa Showcase with yours, 4Green. And in this video, we're finishing up the 1955 set that started with my review with Godzilla 55 and shining the spotlight on Anguirus 55. Now I know, in the Godzilla 55 video, I did feature comparisons with Anguirus here, so I'll try not to retread too much on what I may have covered in that prior feature. Before we begin, let's get some brief history out of the way. Anguirus, or Anguirus, or Anzilla, or whatever you want to call him, was Godzilla's first on-screen kaiju foe, debuting in 1955's Gojira no Gayakushu, aka Godzilla's Counterattack, or Godzilla Raids Again, and sometimes unfortunately named Gigantus the Fire Monster. Discovered battling the Big G on some rando island, the two managed to surface on mainland Japan and trash the city of Osaka before Godzilla killed Anguirus with a savage bite to the neck and a quick bonfire barbecue. In later years, he would show up as a close ally to Godzilla and help him fight Ghidorah, both in Destroy All Monsters, where he gets dropped and stomped, and Godzilla vs. Gigan, who cut him really bad, and he'd also make some quick cameos in Godzilla vs. Megalon, where he falls in a crevice, and he gets his jaw jacked in 1974's Godzilla vs. Mechagodzilla. I'm pretty sure he showed up stock footage-wise in Godzilla's Revenge, but who didn't show up stock via footage in that film? But basically, Anguirus is the whipping boy of the latter half of the Showa era. Anyways, the figure in question here is a representative of his unique look from Raids Again. As much as I like him in his later appearances, his original look is by far my fave. So, let's take a peek. First, I want to start off with, wow, this is a gorgeous figure. I mean it, man. Look at the effort here. The sculpted details, the accuracy to his on-screen image, the pose and the colors are even great. He feels like a figure that you should have no issue paying around $27 for. So get him now before the aftermarket does. He's cast in a nice light gray. I almost want to say it has a subtle bluish tint to it, but I just might be projecting that for some reason. His horned and spiked areas have a nice bleach white, light spray ash white. Breaking all of that uniformity up is the inclusion of a bright maroon color for the interior of his mouth. Interesting, since as a set, both Anguirus and Godzilla 55 are from black and white movie, hence all the gray tones used. However, the color used on his tongue breaks that illusion, making the cement gray his official hue. So while we're on that, let's focus on his head sculpt. It's all there: the horned crest, the horned snout, the feral sharp pointy teeth, his narrow jawline. Perfection. I love that they maintain the upturned eyes, giving him sort of an eye roll expression, but it's also true to the costume. All these features are graced by some good texturing. As we travel down the lower half of the body, we get that dope defined scaling sculpting along his arms, side, and through the hind legs to the tail's end. It's so realized that it almost detracts from his counterpart's figure, whose details were less defined. Even the palms of his hands and feet, or are they all feet? Who cares? They have detail that most Bandai figures don't even bother with. Fantastic. The positioning of his legs is great too. He's not fully on his knees, which is great, and his forelegs are set in a defensive posture. It gives him that more animalistic nature over a man in suit position that we've come accustomed to with our past Anguiruses. Also, moving to the tail, I dig the sporadic spikes jetting out. Add this with his spiked carapace, and he looks dangerous. Speaking of his backside, the spiked carapace is wonderfully rendered. I want to use it as a hairbrush for my daughter's hair. I mean, Anguirus is pretty much a kaiju hairbrush. Wait, now I want to try.
Stop! Ow!
Wait, no, it should work.
Ow! Stop!
Oh, it's getting tangled.
Please stop!
Oh. Anguirus is like the Baron release from 2022, that all four legs have some movement. Maybe not a full 360, but enough movement to alter the standing position a bit. Of course, also like Varan, this can leave the rear legs looking awkward. You can get this guy in some decent attack stances with your Godzilla 55 if you angle these appendages just right. On the plus side, Anguirus does have a tail rotation, which offers some minimal variation on which way you'd like his tail to curve towards. It's not often that Bandai offers tail movement, but when they do, it really doesn't matter so much. Since I featured Anguirus quite a bit in Godzilla 55 video, I'll keep the shots with him to a minimum, just in case some viewers are only interested in this video. Again, a great pair-up, and only one of the few ways to display this version of Anguirus, but there are other display options. Of course, if you're an Anguirus enthusiast, you'll probably want to see how he looks next to some of the other versions of him. In this case, it's almost night and day, no disrespect to the OG Bandai Angie, because he perfectly is serviceable for decades. Be it the larger 8-inch scale version or this downsized one. He's based off of his later Showa appearance, not as ferocious, largely in part by the mold's pretty static pose and softer sculpt. So side by side, these two contrast in a big way, but also carbon dates the basic aesthetic that Bandai went from and eventually evolved into a more screen-accurate figure. Assuming the recent rumor mill, a new 60s design Anguirus could be on the way, in a hopeful, more screen-accurate depiction. Another redesign, the Final Wars version, is a pretty cool update to the classic Toho Kaiju. This guy is bulkier, and what he loses in sharp teeth department he gains in larger plated scales and reptilian ridges. Both have similar articulation, but again, you can't beat 55. And here he is with my son's larger scale Bandai USA edition. Bigger doesn't mean better, baby. And let's do the whole Anguirus family portrait. Of course, another comparison you have is with another spiked quadruped, Varan, the Unbelievable. Anguirus, at first glance, comes across larger, or at least longer than his fellow movie monster series figures, but on further inspection, he just has a long tail. Varan, like Angie, has a similar expression. Many observers felt that he was too big, but I also think it has more to do with his tail length. Regardless, here's how he scales with the 55 Anguirus. As a side note, I do hope we eventually get a quadrupedal Baragon to line up with these two, and wind up with a Showa version of the originally proposed giant monster all-out attack opponents. I think my sweet spot for kaiju design definitely falls for these early years, where they were very dinosaur-inspired or giant mutant animals like Ibera, Manda, Kumonga, Kamakuras, and Mothra. Basically the Monster Island crew. As the era went on into the wacky 70s, the monsters became sort of abstract or experimental. I think that's why Titanosaurus is a hit with many, because he harkens back to this phase of design. Man, I'm so pleased with this. I mean, I have purchased many movie monster series, and sometimes you get it in hand and your reaction is, yep, that's Megalon, and you sort of set it aside to complete your collection, and not really marvel at it. This is one of those situations where it demands your attention, because the effort shows. I mean, I couldn't wait to have Varan or Hedera landing form in my hands, and while they're well done, this feels on another level. Therefore, and I promise I won't give everything high marks in the series, but so far, Jet Jaguar punch rating is knocking suckers out. And this is no exception. Take it away, JJ.
Punch, punch, punch! Punch, punch, punch!
So that's 6 punches, showing an exemplary figure. But unlike Ibera, those high marks were more about a kaiju who is missing from my collection for years, who I never thought I'd see. Anguirus' strengths are in his obscurity, in rendition, scale, dynamic sculpt, pose, and paint, and overall display quality. I'm super impressed with what Bandai has done here, and honestly, they raised the bar for me, knowing next month we'll have a Moso Oji, Minya, and the Flying Form Hedera coming. I'll be looking at those at the same level of quality. If you're on the fence for some insane reason about grabbing this guy, get off the fence and get this guy. I'll never try to influence you to buy a figure normally, but I feel that strongly about this piece of Toho history. If you are an Anguirus enthusiast, get this. If you love Showa-era kaiju, get this. If you vow to never watch my channel again, get this. But if you do plan on sticking around, which I always hope the both of you do, please slap the button in the teeth below, share this with somebody who needs to buy this figure, and if you have a sliver of goodness in your soul, please subscribe. I can only grovel shamelessly so much. Thank you for watching.